stepped up and he said, I kind of feel responsible for this. And he said that at the time that he said that to us, he was only advising us of what could possibly happen. He wasn't threatening us. And I said, and my response was, at the time I was 32 years old. I said, I am 32 years old. I'm the chief financial officer of a retirement community. I'm the first person in my family to get a 4-year degree, let alone a graduate degree. I did not fall into this position because I wasn't smart enough to figure out when somebody was threatening me and when they were threatening me. And I basically plainly said, you were threatening us. There's no doubt about it. And so one of the enforcement center attorneys, Vance, spoke up and she said, she apologized, which is very interesting for this group. She said that the worst thing that could possibly happen to me is that my name would go on a list of people who could no longer get government insured financing. And I responded to her by saying, I'll volunteer to go on that list. I said, I'll volunteer to go on that list. And this is verbatim what I said. Do you people think I'm stupid enough to leave this opportunity when it's all said and done and land in another situation where there's government insured financing involved? You've got to be out of your mind. I don't want to ever deal with any of this ever again. So yeah, put me on the list, but I have one condition. In parentheses next to my name, you put the word voluntary so that people know it wasn't by some nefarious action that I ended up there. And it was interesting. After that moment, after that moment, they would not speak with me one-on-one. They never did again because my name was not on any of the regulatory documents. My predecessor's was. So, and I'd only been there for 4 months at the time. So, I mean, what were they going to do? Throttle me to death over things that had happened years ago? So they wouldn't speak to me one-on-one anymore. And the one time that they had to, there was an attorney present on the line as well. So yeah, the threat of HUD and their civil monetary penalties was an additional layer to this 3-ring circus that we were in.
When I was living in Kenya, I stayed with this family where the father, they go by Baba, he drove a cab. And he's a brilliant man. And I would stay up late at night talking with him for hours and hours and hours and hours. And one time I said to him, Baba, why is it that you drive a cab? You're clearly intelligent enough to be running businesses. I can see your spreadsheets. I mean, we would go through finances. We would go all kinds of things. And keep in mind, this is in a house with no running water, and we were talking over a lantern, a kerosene lantern. And he said, well, I had a construction company, and as the government degraded, they kept coming in and putting in rules. And really, that was kitu kidogo, give me a little something. And every day they wanted to come by and get something. And at the end of the day, I could probably make more money as owning a construction company and paying out all these bribes. But then I would have to know that every day somebody is going to come along and take something from me, and I'm not going to do it. And you shouldn't do it either. And what he was preparing me for was for this culture in Kenya that guards would try and take a little something from you. Give me a little something for some chai tea. Give me something for, this thing. And they were imposing. They never I actually did have a gun held on me, but normally when they're asking for this bribe, they aren't holding a gun at you. They're just saying, hey, it'll be a little easier if you just follow these rules. And, the people that capitulate that to get through today realize, 20, 30 years later, you gave away your life. They took everything from you. So I'm 100% behind you. If you felt like a government agent was threatening you, man, push back on that as hard as you can, because it will never, ever end once you say yes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And fortunately, our CEO at the time was personal friends with Senator John Thune of South Dakota, who's actually, our CEO is a South Dakota resident. So he flew back to South Dakota and sat one-on-one with Senator Thune to tell him what had happened. And Senator Thune's office opened an investigation into the 232 section of HUD. And when that moment happened, all of a sudden, everybody was more cooperative. We just need you to sign something, all of a sudden everybody was more responsive, but it didn't stay that way all the way to the end. There were bumps in the road. The personal liability threat did get thrown out at least one other time. But you're right. I mean, you have to find ways to hold these people accountable. And unfortunately, you have to be very forceful about it. I mean, I said things to people through this process in such a forceful way that, I can't imagine saying that to either a customer or resident family member. I mean, you really had to, even if you were in the most pleasant of moods, you had to really cop an attitude with these people and have a sharp tongue to make sure they were going to understand that they weren't going to get away with whatever it was they were trying to get away with at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the type of stuff that changes who you are as a person. When you're dealing with people that you think are willing to use state authority or power over you, it changes you, because you think, well, the natural state that I was in puts me in a place where I'm vulnerable. And as I'm saying this out loud, I'm thinking maybe that is the message that the rioters and the protesters have. No matter how you feel about it, it is their understanding that if I continue to do the same thing that I was doing before, you're gonna use this power over top of me. And I guess in some way I can relate to that in a way that I hadn't before you and I sat down to chat.
Yeah, there are people in our society who are definitely feeling marginalized right now, and by a variety of different events. And when they don't have, I see this whole thing, unfortunately, from the base level as a failure to properly educate our children when they're in school, because people who lack the discourse or the ability to have a discourse or the understanding of where to go to are the people who are more and more likely to react violently or adversely to these situations that are occurring. And I think a very good start to this conversation needs to be, how are we educating our children? Are we educating our children to react emotionally? Are we educating our children to have critical thinking skills, problem solving skills? How are we doing this? Because, it breaks my heart a lot of the time to see, marginalized people in this area of desperation, and they've never had somebody come along and in any way shine any light on a peaceful way to resolve a situation. It's heartbreaking.